Hello everyone, warm welcome back to True to Form. Well, Sam Turner back here with you for this week's edition. I've just about thawed out from a day at Warwick on Monday. Very enjoyable day it was too. More of that a little bit later on. We'll be starting this week's edition with a couple of Ante-post selections, one for Cheltenham and one for the Grand National, both available at 33 to 1 in the village, so I think they were definitely worth a small interest. I've got a couple of tracker horses from my day at the races at Warwick on Monday with Stuart Mason. We enjoyed an 8-race card, which ended with a spicy finish. And then we'll be spinning through the cards this weekend at Cheltenham and Doncaster. Plenty of double-figure prices on offer. One or two of the selections last week had more holes in than the Wolves defence, so apologies for that. But we did find a couple of double-figure prices which hit the frame and ran good races. Fingers crossed we can score over the weekend at Doncaster or Cheltenham with one or two of our value selections there. So plenty to get through with this week's edition. And let's start off with the Ante-post preview. 233 to 1 post coming up. So this week's Ante-post preview concerns two horses, both available at 33 to 1 at the time of recording. One's going to run hopefully in the Coral Cup and one will run in the Grand National. Now the Coral Cup horse is Beau Zenith, who I'm sure is on plenty of people's radar after his first run for the stable, Nicky Henderson, at Cheltenham before Christmas. He finished third to Mirabad that day, a horse that got loose on the lead and exploited that with a really smart performance. And Beau Zenith was in a different postcode, sort of at the top of the hill, and absolutely charged home in the hands of James Bowen to take third. Really good effort from him there. Went into plenty of notebooks and plenty of trackers, and understandably so, because he looked as though he'd retained the ability that saw him finish a close-up second in the anniversary hurdle, the Grade 1 for juveniles at Aintree. That was a really smart performance where he was beaten by one of Willie Mullins' horses. And yet he still resides off a mark in the mid-130s here. He went to Ascot on Saturday. I was there to see a good card, and I thought he ran really well again behind Altabelli over 2 miles and 3 furlongs. Yet again looking as though that trip is short of his best. He looks as though he's got a stamina-laden pedigree. It looks as though he's going to be a horse that's going to appreciate a distance of ground this spring, and hopefully that will be in the Coral Cup. He's lightly raced hurdler. He's had a light preparation. He's been dropped a pound for that Ascot performance as well, which I thought was pretty commendable in its own right, and 33 to 1 for the Coral Cup strikes me as a good fun wager in a very competitive race. Let's get on to the National then, and 3-card Bragg, a winner at Navan over the weekend, is very much on my radar for that race. He's a second season chaser, hasn't had many convictions over fences at all, but was good enough to finish fourth in an Albert Bartlett behind Stay Away Faye. He's 33 to 1 as well with Paddy Power and Betfair, 5 places on offer. I was really taken with the way that he won that Navan Novices Chase. He just turned them away in the straight. They all came to have a chip at him, and he kept fighting on and jumped brilliantly throughout. He had the cheek pieces back on. I think that might have just sharpened up his technique a touch. He gained 23 lengths on the Race IQ data. His jump index was 8.1, and his finishing percentage was 106, which really does go to show that it was an excellent performance from start to finish by him. I think he was over 6 seconds quicker on the circuit than any other chase on the card as well. That equates to sort of roughly 25 lengths. His speed rating as well, his overall rating was very strong, so it's not as if they crawled around for the first circuit then quickened. This is a horse that's finished second to Corbett's Cross, to Monty Star, third to Spillane's Tower, and he obviously formed a brilliant afternoon for Gordon Elliott, who had 4 winners on the card. So I still think at 33 to 1 represents a really nice bet for the Grand National. We're seeing a different type of horse win that race. He's got that bit of backclass from his hurdling campaign, and I think he's going the right way as a chaser. So those two really do make plenty of interest to me. So as I mentioned, I enjoyed a really good afternoon on Monday afternoon at Warwick with Stuart Machin. It was cold, but we had an 8-race card, and there was plenty of interest, not least in the last race where Jerry Halliwell's horse won the Hunter Chase in the hands of Jack Andrew, who's got to be the tallest jockey that's ever ridden. But anyway, early on in the card, there were a couple of horses that really caught my eye, not least in the first division of the Mares Hurdle, which was won by That's Nice, Nicky Henderson's mare, putting together a better performance than she did at Cheltenham behind Country Mile, where she was disappointing that day, but she sort of bounced back to form. And interesting to see the time of that race was, I think, 7 seconds quicker than the second division, much quicker than the later handicap hurdle, or admittedly for novices. and it was only sort of a 0 to 95, 0 to 100 race as well. So not too much to get carried away with That's nice performance. But there was one horse that got into the frame that I thought ran an extraordinary race, and was very, very taken with Toby Laws's mare, C Presenting. Now, she lost 3.5 lengths in the jumping stakes on both circuits on the rest of the field, according to the Race IQ data. Her jump index was just 5.7, and she was driven along on the home turn by a rider and didn't look as though she was going to take any hand in the finish. However, she really charged home under Kevin Brogan. I was very taken with that performance. She looked as though the inexperience was going to catch her out at various stages around that final circuit at Warwick, as those with a little bit more experience under rules took control of that race. But I really did appreciate how she rattled home. We were down by the last hurdle. She pinged that with a little bit more alacrity and economy, and she was a little bit unlucky not to be there right in the mix. I think it was a really good performance from her. She looks more stamina than speed. I think that goes without saying. She's got a couple of horses in her pedigree like Listen and Learn and What You Call Her, who are certainly better suited by a distance of ground. Of course, she started life when she was third in an Irish Point. I think she will have learnt a lot from this Warwick performance. I was very taken with her. I think she can build on that going forward. The second selection ran in the novice limited handicap chase, and I think Classic Anthem is definitely one for your trackers. He was a weak backward horse and not quite seeing out his races last year, but he still showed plenty of promise and ability at places like Sandown and Kempton. He looked better suited by a right-handed track. That was until Monday afternoon, where he really took off in the straight to finish a close-up second behind a horse that had managed to win on Boxing Day at Kempton, a horse of Ben Pauling's. Thought that was a really smart performance from Classic Anthem. He wasn't done any favours by a horse unseating down the back straight either, although Sean Bowen didn't feel that cost him victory. But he was really taken with how he jumped. I listened to Sean's debrief. I was fortunate enough to be in close proximity there, and he was very taken with how Classic Anthem is coming together. I thought his jump index was sort of 7.2 at Warwick, which was pretty good, especially for inexperienced horses jumping around a tricky jumping track. And Sean Bowen was very complimentary about him. I would think that he would be tailor-made for a 2.5 mile Sandown handicap chase, a novices handicap chase, or even back at Kempton. But Sandown's where he's run his two best races, and fingers crossed we'll see him there in the weeks to come. Well, it promises to be a really informative weekend at Cheltenham and Doncaster. Plenty of good horses on show, and of course Trials Day at Cheltenham. I'm fortunate enough to be there with Lydia Hislop and Martin Dixon, so looking forward to running the rule over those races, including the 1240, which is the JCB Triumph Hurdle Trial, in which East India Doc is slight odds on. I think that's a fair price really for a horse of his quality. I know we saw a really good juvenile in Lulamba at Ascot last week, and that looked to be a race that will throw up future winners. Obviously the second horse of Gary Moore's was very keen but travelled quite nicely, and Vianney I think needs one more run, and he might be qualified for the Boodles handicap, the Fred Winter. Definitely want to keep on side for that race. But East India Doc I think sets a very, very high standard, certainly on the figures that I work to, and I'll be disappointed if he can't win that opener. There'll be a bit more value to be had in the 2.5 mile handicap, in which Moon d'Orange takes my eye a little bit for John McConnell. Hopefully he will come over. He was second to In the Waterside, Paul Nicholls' horse, over the festive period, and I thought that was a really nice run. I think he's much better off at 2.5, this horse. He doesn't seem to be getting the 3 miles which he tackled against Haiti Couleur and also Highland, and looks much happier over these intermediate trips. I'd like to see how he goes in this 2.5 mile race. He travels quite nicely. He's been around Cheltenham a couple of times, and I think he's around 10 to 1, I think, and I think that's a fair each way bet in that 150. Right, the Cotswold Chase at 225 features L'Homme Pressé and, of course, Gentleman's Game. L'Homme Pressé comes from a yard that are just struggling for a touch of form in January. Obviously, he's a horse that I put up for the King George. He ran really well. It's just worrying me at 6 to 4 that the stable is a bit quiet, and that would be a bit of a slight concern for me. Gentleman's Game obviously has got a couple of entries in the DRF, so will even run. And I'm sort of drawn really to Capodanno, who's only got one entry on his scorecard, and that is this race. He was last year's winner, of course. This is his sole entry. He hasn't got anything at the DRF. It looked a bit of a look-see at Tremor last time out. That race has thrown up a winner already with Appreciate It. Fourth in the Ryanair, of course, a horse that seems to come to himself at the turn of the year and into the spring. I think he's available at 7 or 15 to 2. I think he's probably one of the more interesting horses in the race. I tried to make a case for the likes of Dash or Drasher, and I just couldn't bring myself to put him up at 16s, even though I thought he ran okay at Cheltenham over fences last time behind Numitor. But I think Capodanno looks as though he's coming to the boil a little bit, and I think 15-2 for him is very fair. The Cleve Hurdle is an interesting contest, and I'll probably end up backing Buddy 1 each way at 11-2, 5-1. You have to do this with a proviso that his rider is still a conditional jockey, and when you see him against Sean Bowen, the disparity is quite sizable. But, you know, he's a horse that always finishes 6, 7, 8 lengths behind Teopo. He was only 4 lengths behind Strong Leader at Aintree. He's been chasing this year, but I think hurdling is much more his cup of tea. I think it sort of narrows down the difference between the jockeys, if that makes any sense. I think over fences it probably gets a little bit more highlighted and showcased. So I think I'll go with Buddy 1 each way in the Cleve, as I say, around 11-2. Obviously, Doncaster isn't on Racing TV, but will be available on ITV and other mediums. And the horse I'm really enjoying watching this year is Storming Crossgales, who takes on the 130. Now, this horse was picked up for $5,000 out of the Noel Fahey Racing Club by the Podgsons, and he's won 2 since. He won at Doncaster, stayed on very strongly to win in good style, and then went to Southwell, absolutely bolted up in the hands of James Bowie. Now, he's only gone up £10 for those 2 wins. I think that's very fair, but it's just looking at the lengths that he gains on his rivals in these races. 17 lengths at Doncaster for a racing IQ index of 8.1 jumping wise, and then at Southwell 26 lengths he picked up and a race IQ jump index of 7.3. So he's a real strong stayer at 2 miles. Flat track suits him very well. Flat left-handed track, decent ground. I think Storming Crossgales with James Bowen booked could go very well at the foot of the weights in that 130. The 205, the River Don, I like a couple in this. I like Moon Rocket, who's also won at Doncaster this year and then got the job done at odds on at Southwell last time, staying on strongly. I think the track suits him. I think the slightly drier ground will suit him ideally. And although he was probably helped by the fact his rival fell at Doncaster, I think he was still on top at the time. He looks a horse very much going the right way. Same comment also applies to Jigs Forge, who I'm told takes in this race rather than an alternative engagement at Cheltenham. I think he's available at double figure odds. Really take with him at Fosslas, a strong galloping performance. And even with the proviso that perhaps 1 or 2 of Ben Pauling's horses aren't flourishing as much as they did pre-Christmas, I think he'll run very well. So that's Jigs Forge and Moon Rocket in the 205, the River Don. And let's wind up with a bet in the Great Yorkshire Chase. A couple of horses that tackled the race last year. Forward Plan, second in the race last year, beaten a nose, and has run well again this season. I saw him run first hand at Wincanton, where he just couldn't land a blow that day on his comeback, finishing 4th in a race that was won by Al Dancer off the front. And then, of course, he ran really well last time out at Donny. And the other horse I quite like is Diane Sayers' Charlie Uberales, who was third in this in 2024. Travelled very strongly in a December handicap to beat Doc Pickme. Forward Plan was third on that occasion. And it's interesting to note that Diane's sole other runner in the last 7 days managed to win at Haydock. So the yard are obviously in really good nick. I think Forward Plan's an 8-1 chance. I think Charlie Uberales is a 14's chance. I think that makes plenty of appeal. So those would be my 2 in the Great Yorkshire Chase. So plenty to get your teeth into for the weekend then at Doncaster and also Cheltenham. Really enjoy your sport. Have a great day if you're going to either venue. I look forward to speaking to you next week. Bye for now.
Watch live racing now on racingtv.com.